Hey everyone, welcome to the Suffolk Legal Innovation and Technology Lab's first Wednesday workshops for the document assembly line community. These workshops are a chance to dive deeper into topics related to building guided interviews with Docassemble using the document assembly line. Today's topic is translating Docassemble interviews, and our expert guest is Quinten Steenhuis, the lead developer of the assembly line tools. I'll ask him to introduce himself in a minute, but first, this workshop is being recorded and we will share it on our YouTube channel. To find it, just check our blog at suffolklitlab.org or search for Suffolk Lit Lab on YouTube. If you're participating live on Zoom, please use the chat to ask questions. I will make sure Quinten I'll call attention to them as we go if he doesn't see them. It's optional if you want to be on video or not. But if we do get to the point where we're sharing and troubleshooting, you can share your screen to demonstrate a problem. Just please wait until we invite you to. Before we dive in, if you're hearing about the Lit Lab or the document assembly line for the first time, head over to suffolklitlab.org to learn more. Everyone who uses Docassemble and the document assembly line tools is welcome to attend our weekly community meetings, join our community forum on Microsoft Teams, and attend these workshops. If you'd like to join us, just email us at litlab@suffolk.edu. Okay, let's get started. Quinten, go ahead and introduce yourself, and I'll let you take it from here.
All right. Hello, everybody. Thanks for that introduction, Sam. So I think that most of the folks here on this call know me. I suppose you could be watching it on YouTube, but I help run the document assembly line here at Suffolk. So today, I think that we could cover so many different topics within the concept of translation. I just want to start with this kind of big overview, which is we have some really nice notes on our website about it. So I'm going to put a link to this in the chat. And the nice thing about having people live is that you can ask them questions and talk about specific things you're interested in. So this is not like a RTFM moment here. I just wanted to make sure people have this to look at later. That said, I'm curious like what questions people have about translation. What are some barriers they have? If there's anything particularly that you would like to talk about, if you want to put it in the chat, I'll make sure that we spend some time talking about it today in about the half hour, 35 minutes or so that we have. So if you have anything that you really want to make sure you talk about now, go ahead and put that in the chat and I will make sure we can get that today live, even before we get to the questions probably. I'm not getting a lot of responses yet. I'm curious, who here has translated an interview already? If you want to just raise your hand. Use the Zoom features for that. Who's ever done a multilingual interview? I know there's some hands that should be up. Careless. And Kelly, I think too, but I did. Who here has an interview coming up that they're going to try to get translated?
Sorry, I had disabled guests' ability to unmute themselves. You now can unmute yourself. Sorry about that.
Oh yeah, you can jump in and
My
unmute
bad.
yourself too. That's another way to do it if you can't raise the hand. All right. Oh, okay. So we'll just give a general overview then. Doesn't sound like people have something that soon up right now, so that's totally fine. All right. So the big picture of translation in Docassemble is that there are different kinds of bits of text in your interview that have different ways of getting translated. I made a really simple interview here for us to play around with here. And this is an interview that has text that appears on the screen. That's in like the standard Docassemble areas. That would include something like, if we added some fields here. So this here, this hello world text, this sub-question text, the text next to a field, these all get translated the same way. And that is in the form of a spreadsheet that you can create through either Docassemble's built-in functionality or through our assembly line tools. And that's I find the most flexible way to get translations done is to have as much text as you can put in to this translation spreadsheet. There's some other interface elements that you can translate that you may want to translate that use a different system, which we normally call the words translation system. And those little bits of text are basically built-in HTML pages or elements of the HTML pages that come with Docassemble. They're not really part of your interview itself. Those can only be translated using this other system, the words.yaml system. So that includes things like the continue button here, although there's another way we can translate that I can show you. It includes all of these menu items here. So all of the names here can be changed to other text. You can translate from English to English if you just don't like the current wording, but you can also translate them into another language. Let's see, the other thing to know is that your language that you use when you're using the interview is controlled by your user profile. So if I set my language here to ES, I believe that should update it for me right away. I'm going to reset that PyPI password, everybody. So don't worry about that. And I think it sometimes takes a little while to kick in. But here, see, it's now finished refreshing, and it's using the translation of these terms here. That includes, so you can see here, it includes even things like in the playground elements. And you also might notice that some text is not translated here. It's not because it can't be translated. It's just because it wasn't included in this custom translation file. Let's see, when you're working, I'm going to go ahead and change my language back to English or remove it. So if I don't have any language defined there in my profile, it is going to use the language that is the default language for the server, which I'm not going to pull up, but it is a configuration item that you can set system-wide. I'm going to just point you to where that appears. It's underneath the Docassemble documentation page. You can go to language, features language support. And you can see some of the configuration areas that you can update to change the default language, for example. Okay. Another thing that you can do, let's say that you want to have a link that starts out in a particular language. If that's the case, you generally can use this kind of pre-canned parameter called lang and use a 2-letter language code as part of the URL. So like, let's say that I wanted to, but the thing is, if that's something that you want to change the language of your interview, you need to support it. The assembly line kind of supports that automatically for you, so you don't have to really think about adding that support. But some of the built-in system pages also use that same convention of the lang equals ES, meaning that page is going to be presented in that language, Spanish in this case. I guess that's another good thing for us to just say briefly, which is that when I talk about the language code, notice that I use ES for Spanish. You might be kind of familiar with this convention, but not really have thought about it or had to use it before. That comes from the ISO language codes. So generally, those are 2-digit codes, 2-character codes. And you can find these. They're defined by International Standards Organization Standard 639. And then there's a 2- and 3-digit version of these. We're mostly using the 2-digit ones.
I just dropped that link in the chat too, so.
Perfect, thank you. Let me see. The second thing to know about these codes is that this is just kind of a convention. So when we say use this language code, we have to agree with it in all of the different places that we're going to reference it, both the words.yaml file and inside the language translation spreadsheet. So you could use an invented code for a language that doesn't exist yet, as long as you have it matched in both of those places. Both the language code that you tell that Docassemble you're going to use, and the one that you have available for it to pull from. Okay, so let me show you. Let's start with the words.yaml because I think that's pretty straightforward and easy to understand. And you can play around with it on your own server right away without having to have an interview to use. So to get to create your own words.yaml file, you can go to the utilities. If you're logged in, I think you need to be a developer privilege is the minimum privilege that you need to get access to this. So I think everybody here could do that if you've a developer, at least on a server that you work on. So I'm going to go to my profile name, then utilities. And there's this translate system phrases into another language. System phrases are the things that I've been calling the words.yaml system. And this is really the only tool that lets you do this now. We don't have any assembly line special way to do this. So what you would do is you just put in the 2-digit code that you would like to use for that language. And again, it should match the ISO language code list, but it's technically anything that you want. I could write like Esperanto here and it would still work as long as I'm also matching it when I say what my language is. Just usually a good idea to stick with that language. And then I'm going to choose the output format. For this particular file, it just makes sense to stick with what everyone's been using forever, which is a YAML format. But these are two other options. XLSX, that's a Excel spreadsheet. You can use that system. And XLIF, these are common translation formats to use that are XML based. I don't think you get a lot of benefit from using those unless you need to because maybe of a translation text management tool that you already use. So if you're a professional translator, you might be familiar with this XLIF format, and you might want to get the output in that format. If you're using this system here, the translate system phrases into another language utility, when you click translate, another reason to use the standard ISO codes is that it's going to send this to Google Translate for you, as long as you've configured an API key that points to Google. And that API key is set up in your configuration. It's a really handy thing because actually often these little system phrases, you can get perfectly great translations with Google Translate for them as a starting point and save a lot of time. You should still review it to make sure they're accurate, but this is for kind of these little built-in bits of text. Usually they're short and Google Translate can handle them pretty well. So I'm going to do this and you're going to see that it's going to generate a partial translation for me for almost all of the terms. I think maybe all of them actually are going to get a translation because I'm using a language Google Translate knows. If I go back here and I may put in another language, I actually am curious about Esperanto. I don't think that's the language code for it, so I think it's going to not work. And it's not going to be able to use Google Translate. Although I do think Google Translate knows Esperanto. Yeah, so this is what you get when the language is not, either you don't have the Google Translate API set up and you don't have an API key set up in your config, or it's a made up language. You're going to get this behavior here where the entries are just left as null. But what we have here is basically a table where on the left, we have the system phrase, and on the right, we have the translation. And you can look through and you can see if you have some text on the screen that you would like to change, you can generally edit this file and put it in the right place, which we'll talk about as well. And you'll be able to get that phrase translated. So if you like kind of come to this system here and if you're on a page and you want to see, hey, this is something that I know needs to get translated, you can go to this system, search for it, and then figure out the translation. So there are a couple of things to point out here. There are some places where there's special variables that are inserted, and those have this special syntax here with the % symbol. So you're going to leave those alone in the translation. And generally it's %s. I think this is the a very old C format string format that is being borrowed here for the translation from printf, I think. But if you just leave those alone, it should be fine. That means something is going to be inserted here. That's going to be a variable. And this template lets you like change where that appears. Let's say you have a language with a different grammatical order of noun, verb, pronoun, whatever it is. You can just move that variable to the right place in the translated string. So let's see. Are there any other good examples here where it's really easy to see what that is? I guess I could look for %. You can see there's 44 there like that. Okay, so here you go. Confirmation email has been sent to this email address. And obviously in some languages, where that little bit of text would go is going to vary from the order that's appropriate in English. So that's why it's provided to you to kind of move around to go. All right, where does this go? Okay, let's say you've made your words.yaml file. You would need to then download it, save it in a text editor, and then it needs to get added to a package that you can install on the server. Finally, you can take that and add it to the configuration. So I'm not going to show my configuration. Too many passwords to reset. Let's see. All right, let's just look for. All right, so you're going to add a line to your configuration that looks like this. So every entry here, notice how it's pointing to a package. This is system-wide available languages. So you can only configure this once for the whole server. You can't have different system languages, translations for different interviews. That is a limit to the system, I guess. It's a package that's installed. We put this file that we've made, just a plain text file that we save with any name we choose, but you should name it something like this, I think, language code words.yml for consistency. And then you just mention it here in the global configuration. You do not need to translate every bit of text. You choose which ones you want to translate. So you can just leave those lines as null. You can delete them so you're not confused later when you come back to it and want to see what things you changed. Or you could translate everything. Like I said, using Google Translate is really helpful here. And it's going to let you get a really nice starting point for that system translation. There's going to be some weird things, like it might not understand that. Well, there's some nouns and verbs that we might use in different ways when they're on their own. It doesn't have enough context to know like the right translation. So you have to look out for that kind of thing. Sorry, go ahead.
It just made me wonder, is there a way to get clever with phrases? So for example, I saw that it include a PDF file and include a docx file are different, are meant to be translated differently. Could you decide that, in Spanish, it's going to be include a variable file, and like just have the include a blank file? Is there a way to get clever?
You could change it to, you need to have the exact matching phrase because it's basically looking for this exact string. And it's like, oh, this is the exact string in this list. So I'm going to translate that exactly to whatever's on the right.
So it's probably not worthwhile.
Probably not. Although I'm not sure if I totally, there might be something to do to what you're saying. I'm just not sure if I totally.
Okay. Yeah. Never mind.
Yeah, it's okay though. All right. So let's see. Yeah. So Matt, your question was, what should we translate? I would say everything in this list is worth translating because someone in your system might encounter a term here that you didn't really think ahead about, but you can do it so easily with Google Translate. And generally it's going to be comprehensible. So let's see. One more thing to talk about here is that we have our own words.yaml files in the assembly line interview here. So you'll see that under data sources here, we have some that basically we prepared that exact way by using Google Translate. And I think that we've done some manual review. And it looks like it's actually only for Spanish. So if you find that there's some system phrases, this was last changed 4 years ago, we probably should update this. We're happy to take pull requests to improve the language here. And then it's a shared file that everybody can access. That will have better system phrases. Actually, I'm curious, tell me on the chat if there's a language that you have planned to put into that is not in Spanish. And that's not the first language, at least, that you're going to translate into. I'm curious to know what other languages people are thinking of using. Okay, another follow-up question from Matt is, what about some of our pages that are built into Docassemble that are not part of the system languages maybe? So I think for the interview list, I believe we do use the same method of translating where you can add it to the words.yml file, and then it's available for translation. So you can use, okay, so one of the reasons why I always refer to this as the words translation system. Well, it's called words in the configuration. The other reason is you can use it yourself without having to be a system phrase by using the word function. So I think we already are using this for all of the text that appears as part of the interview list page. So therefore it's configurable by you, either by editing the words.yaml file or by adding different configuration options. Let me see if I can quickly get that, because I think this is probably the place to spend the most time, honestly, because people probably understand and can follow the directions better for the other parts we'll go over a little bit more quickly, which is the translation spreadsheet. So I'm going to just look at the code here. Sorry, you don't have to necessarily do this to get it. Matt's talking about the interview list page. I'm just going to see if I'm remembering correctly, and then I'll tell you the answer. You don't have to look at it the way that I'm looking at it right now. Okay, so there's some text here that you can edit from the configuration. So these terms like page title and so on, those come from the global configuration, all those uppercase words. I don't think we have very much hard-coded English, but there does seem to be a little bit here. So here we have start a new form. That's one you can change by editing the words.yaml file because it's using Word. And then here, tap the title of a form to keep working on it. Is the default. We use page sub question if it's available. Yeah, so I think our hard-coded English terms can all be overridden. It looks like there's an exception here, which is search. And we did this so that it was easier for you to translate it instead of making you add, make a copy of this and add a translation spreadsheet. But you could do that too. And if you see places where we're missing terms, then we can go in and fix those. And probably the way we would do it is if it doesn't really make sense to have a configuration option for it, which it might not, we might use a word.yaml file translation for you. And those will not appear when you use the utilities here, but you can just add your own rows for things that you want to add your own custom translation for using the word function. Okay. All right, so I'm seeing some other languages: Portuguese, Haitian Creole, Spanish, French, Arabic, Nepali. So if we have these languages here, then, and you would like to have like a shared file that everybody can benefit from, we're happy to add that here. And if you're not sure how to do a pull request to add it, you can just send it to us using, presumably you found this, you have some way to get in contact with us to send it to us. Okay. We spent so much time on this, but I do think it was the most complicated part. So I'm going to show you the other options that we have here for translation. So let's say we wanted to translate this little hello world interview here. So you can translate it from this utilities page. It's just a bit clunky to do. And there's some things that aren't that great about it. So I'll show you how that works. What I'm going to do is I'm going to copy the URL from the URL bar when the interview is running. That's the easiest way to do it for this utilities. I'm going to translate system phrases into another language. No, sorry, download interview phrase translation file. This is what the path should look like. I'm going to put in the language. And again, here, I'm going to use the default output format of XLSX. That's the least confusing format to use. You can use XLIF, but there's not really a good reason to do that. I click the download button. So this totally is fine. It's going to pop up for you in this format. And what are some of the disadvantages? One is, well, it's not so easy to kind of copy this URL. That might be kind of a clunky thing for you to do. And also, if you're going to send this to your translator, this doesn't happen to have a lot of complicated code in it. But if it did, you would have to kind of do a word count on your own to understand how much the translator is going to have to charge you. You don't necessarily want to count on them to rely on them to tell you the accurate word count, because they might not leave out counts for code in the way that they should. That can usually be a really large part of the translation budget otherwise. So this is what we get. You have a couple of columns here in this translation file. And basically what you need to tell your translator, whoever that is look at columns G, see the text there, and put it into column H. The rest of these columns are kind of, this is the only one that really matters, this hash. What happens is when Docassemble runs the interview, it runs it through a function that turns this text into this number, setting an MD5 hash. And then if they match, it shows this value instead of this value. So these are really the only columns that matter. But this also, I guess the translation language matters too, because it's looking for that as well, based on the language of the interview. And these are kind of more for your information. So your translator is going to read this and add translation. Pretty simple to do. And we've had good results with the translators that we've used in the past to do that are professional translators. I don't have any special relationship with them, except that they've worked really well for me the last 6 or 7 years. I use Day Translations. It's an online vendor, and they've been inexpensive, and you're going to probably pay 10 to 15 cents a word for Spanish. And some languages are as expensive as 30 or 40 cents a word, if they're much less commonly written. I think we got that quote, something like that, for Cape Verdean Creole, for example. Most languages are going to be in that 10 to 20 cent range. Okay. So that's one way to do it. If you have the assembly line installed, I'll show you what we do instead. You can go to the dashboard. You presumably have used this before if you have the assembly line installed. If not, we have instructions for that on our website for how to install it. We have a dashboard here called Prepare Translation Files. And there's two kind of enhancements here. One is you can choose an installed interview that's in your dispatch directive. If you don't know what that means, don't worry about it. But if you do, this might be a helpful shortcut for you. It's basically what appears when you go to the /list and point on your server. So if you can go here and see the interview, it'll appear in this list, which is kind of handy. And you can select it, put in multiple language codes. So if you need it translated into 5 different languages. It'll translate into 5 different languages. And you can download them all at once. I'll show you what this looks like. I'm choosing a much bigger interview here. I think we've not ever translated into Italian, but it's been translated into Spanish already. So you can see what that looks like as well. When there's partial, I think probably what's happened is that some languages, some of the words have changed and some are the same. So, okay, this is really helpful to see. So for 2 languages, for one language, we've had no rows translated yet. So this is telling us here 100% of the documents don't need to get translated. For Spanish, we're really good. We have 40 rows that aren't translated out of 1,270 total rows. For Haitian, we apparently started a translation, but it's really out of date. I think it's probably just some of the system kinds of background assembly line text that's in that number. So let me show you what it looks like when you have a bigger interview that has more rows also. So here is an interview that includes our assembly line functionality. So you'll see here, the list of interview is going to include at the top, it's working from the top down. So first you have any included YAML files. And we got a bunch in this interview. And so this is really helpful at this point. We got, here we have another package, AL Massachusetts, that's kind of our branding package. And every phrase in these documents is going to be offered for translation. So even if you don't have a screen shown in the interview, it's going to be pulled into the translation file. So this is just something to know. You might not know that an interview page gets pulled in. You might not think it needs to be translated. You should generally translate everything that's here. But what we try to do is maintain these so that our system packages that have tons of phrases that you might not need have up-to-date translations. And if you're missing some, if you happen to translate something that has not been translated yet, please let us know and we can contribute your translation again here so it's shared by other folks. One more thing I'll show you here in this document is at the end of the file, you'll see these sequence numbers. I think that's the title of this column C. They're going to usually be very low. I think it's what order it is on the screen. I think like if you have a bunch of fields, like the last field, it's going to get the highest number. But when you start seeing numbers that start in 4-digit numbers, these are previously translated rows of your text, of your spreadsheet, that are no longer valid. So they're still left in the file. You might use this to tell the translator, hey, we changed this question. We added 5 words. If you want to see the old translation, it's in the file and you can search for it and copy that. And then please just edit this so you only are changing the great translation we had before by adding those 5 words. So it's not the most useful feature, but it is there. And it's just to explain to you why you're going to see extra copies of some of the phrases at the end of the file. It's been translated before, and it's no longer a valid translation.
Quinten, I know you wanted to wrap up at 2:40 at the very latest, so I'm just giving you a heads up that we're a few minutes away.
Okay. All right, let's see. I'm looking at the questions that popped up. Different ways of selecting or changing the language. Yeah, okay, so let me just go over this page again in the dashboard. So what we have here, this is the kind of information you could send to your translator. You can say, hey, here's a file we're sending you. There's 1,270 words to translate. And what we've done is we're excluding any code. So like any Mako text is going to be excluded from that count. So we're like doing that work in advance for the translator. So it's really important that you tell them that number and not let them do their own word count. Otherwise it's going to be like 10, 20% higher. And then this is just kind of for you to understand an idea of how much work is to be done. Let's see. me show you one cool thing I was trying that I don't have working yet. I was like, hey, it'd be cool if I could demonstrate this today on this call, but it doesn't work yet. So it's more of an idea. I think you can do really well for translation using a large language model for the first draft nowadays. So, but it doesn't, you can't do it without having human review. So I think this is going to be something I'm going to finish up in the next week or so, because it's really pretty straightforward to do. I had been worried about the price. I was like, I got to optimize this so we can translate as many rows in one prompt as possible. But then I ran the numbers, and for the cheapest model, translating like, let's say 30,000 words, that's much bigger than this. This is 18,000 words for a whole 209A restraining order system. That would cost like 17 cents with the cheapest model, up to like $2 for the most expensive model that I think would give you better translation results. So I realized I shouldn't try to optimize it more than that. $2 is already very cheap compared to like $3,000 to $5,000 it would cost for a human to translate it. And usually for a review, if you have a professional translator review it, generally it's going to be about half the cost of having them write it from scratch. So this is what we're going to do here. It's going to be like this. There's something I have to fix, like literally, I was working on this the last couple of minutes, so probably a very small typo. This is my thought. You just check a box, say you want it to do the translation. You can give it some context clues. So it like doesn't translate that noun the wrong way, because it knows this is about this thing and not that thing. And you can have a glossary of specific terms. This is something we use often when we're doing Spanish. We want to use particular local terms. So like, I think for landlord, for example, dueño is the most common way to translate that in the South American populations that migrate around Massachusetts and Boston. And there are other terms that you might get out of the box if you don't tell it to use certain kind of vocabulary that are going to be Spanish, but not localized to your context. So those are the kind of things we can customize here. Let me show you an interview that's translated. I think that's the next question that people had. So we'll go to, we have our guardianship interviews translated, and I think we have to update it again, but until you can see most of it. So there's a couple ways you can show the translation. I'm okay being a few minutes late for this networking thing, so I don't mind going over a little bit. These are assembly line features here. There's one that shows this text here that lets you click. I think this is really helpful for the first screen of the interview, so people don't miss it. And then as they're using the interview, they may prefer this system instead. And the other thing that I can do is I can say lang equals ES as a shortcut. And then this is going to start out in the proper language. Should make sure. Yeah, okay. I'm not sure why. I might have had to have it be a starting link rather than already having picked up the link from what I sent over. So, okay, but I can change it here to English. Something that is a little annoying is that the navigation on the left might not refresh. So that is a limit of that. But you often might enjoy being able to switch between languages if you're helping somebody looking over their shoulder. You don't speak Spanish. You want to be able to read the English version of the text. That's mostly what that's for, the quick translation switching. And this does the same thing. Okay. So this is provided by some assembly line functionality. So it's covered here in more detail. You could add that drop-down selector by putting in this default screen part. And you can see our default way of doing it. And you can put this inline language list wherever you want as well. And that's just the clickable selector that we saw on the front screen. You could have a question that you ask that's interactive. And we have this special language variable, AL interview. Hold on. This actually example is wrong. It's not AL interview languages. This is all of the available languages. Sorry about that. I'm going to update that with the proper variable name. But we just don't use this style. If you wanted to ask a question of the user at the beginning of the interview, you could ask for their language, and then we're going to automatically, on every screen load, update the screen to have the language of the user selected. So you don't have to do anything else other than asking a question with the right variable name. This is not the right one to do that. And if you prefer that to our two built-in methods, those two language switcher options. So definitely take a look at this to give you some ideas about how it works in Jira. I'll take a couple more things that are really worth calling out, which are not covered here, but are really important. I think we talk about them here under writing good questions. Somewhere in one of these sections here. Okay, the basic idea is, there's this planning for translation. Okay, it was underneath here under coding. If you want to find it there, coding style guide. So the important thing is to know that you shouldn't have like little bits of text that you want to have conditions in, because that will make it really hard for the translator to do correctly. Different languages have different orders of noun, whatever. The language syntax, grammar isn't the same. So you can't have a little random bit of text that gets translated. It has to be the whole sentence at a time. It needs to be written like this. So that's important to think about when you're writing your interview at the beginning. Another thing, I guess, to know is when you want to translate text like the sections here, you need a language modifier. So here's an example of that. You can put that per block. That's, I guess, really a third way to translate text that I should have mentioned. That also is relevant. And then that is covered on our translation overview page, though. And then finally, something specific, really specific to know is, I think this is covered on our language translation page again. The translations block has to be the very first part of the file. That's just the limit of how Docassemble translations work. I think that covers the main things I would want someone to know. Let's see what other questions are there. Oh yeah, that was what Caroline just said. Any other last questions?
Quinten. I think we can urge folks to post any other questions in the coding help forum or somewhere else. Thank you so much. Hope you get to your next appointment on time.
All right, thanks. Good to see everybody.
Thanks, everyone. I'll be posting this to YouTube shortly.
Take care.